Welcome to the third episode of my tutorial series on the AVR framework. Today I want to be covering the interactable objects. The interactable objects inherit a lot of functionality, which I want to dive into in this episode. So let's start off by making one from scratch. So to do that, let's go into the blueprint folder, go into interactables, go into objects, and then we'll make a child object of our interactable. And I want to be making one called calibrator. For that, I will also make a new folder, so it's all nice and neat, and I will call that folder tutorial, which will represent a new category that this object is in. I'm just going to quickly move that in there and go right in. So let's open up the calibrator object, and we see here in the viewport it's still empty, so I'm going to assign a static mesh. So this should be called a calibrator. That is just a standard Unreal static mesh. And if we drag that into the world, we now see that we have an object here. And if we look at that through VR, looking at the object inside VR, we can already see that we have some basic functionality in place. We can pick up the object, we can rotate it in all directions, we can scale it, and if we select it with the trigger button, we can already see that we have an information window and a delete button. So let's head out and try to adjust some additional functionality so we can do even more things with the object. Going back to the object, in the class defaults of the object, we can see that we have a lot of parameters that we can set. I want to start off by changing possible materials. So for that, let's create a new possible material. So that should be maybe the default color. And we need to open a new map. This needs to represent the component that we want to change. So if you have multiple components, they need to be assigned differently. So for that, let's go into the root component that we want to change. And we'll copy the component tag of it. We can also create a new one, remember, for different components, just so they can be assigned differently. Going back to the class defaults, we want to change the mesh root. And then we want to make new materials, and I'm just going to copy them over one by one of the original object. So we have our standard material in place. So this is a bit ugly. I have to make the window a bit smaller and do that through the content browser. Now that the default material is copied over, we'll create another color. For that, we'll add the color red in our possible materials. We add a map, define the component for which it should change the material, and then we'll make 6 material faces for the different material faces of the calibrator and make them all in some kind of red. Then the next step is that we need to represent a color. This color will be shown in the selection menu. So we have 2 colors, one default color and one red color. And the default, the red color we already know is going to be this one, and the default color should be some kind of gray. And then we can save and compile, and we can look at that in VR. Now inside VR, if we just open the selection menu, we see that we have a new field here, and we have our 2 colors, which represent the different materials. So let's get out again. If you want to make multiple objects change their colors in the same way, we have to assign material groups. So for that, let me duplicate the object that we just created. And we see that we have a material group of 2 inside of here. So we have to make sure that every object inside the material group has the same set of objects inside. So if for this one we add this one and itself, and for this one we add this one. And now if we go inside play, we see that if we change the color on this one, it also changes equivalently on the other one. So let's take a look inside the object again, and let's change the next feature. The next feature that I want to be looking at is the object group. This allows us to exchange objects into different objects. So I'm just going to add two objects here. One of them is itself, so you can return to its former self, and the other one I'll just make the block shape. Remember, everything that should appear in the selection menu needs to be listed in here as a selection menu. So we're going to add the exchange in here. And now if we take a quick look at it and press play and look at the object again, we can switch between these objects. Additionally, if the same for the material also exists in an object exchange group. So we want to add this element to the object exchange group. That means we have to select it, and now this element will be changed as well equivalently. So now if you press play and we hit that, you can see both objects are being changed. That is very useful if you want to have been changing multiple chairs or multiple desks at the same time into a set. Okay, so let's take a look inside our object again, and we want to take a look at the next feature. So in the selection type, we see that we have a lot more features available. So the next thing I want to go over is a light. For that, I'm simply going to create a point light as a component, make that so it's a bit visible. So I'm just going to make it quite bright. And we can see we have a light in here, but we want to make it toggleable through the selection menu. So we have two functions for that. The first one is construction light, and we will just set the visibility of the light. So the only thing this does is make it visible or invisible. So now if we press on here and we press the light, we can see that we can turn them on and off individually. To make the functionality also work inside the selection menu, let's make an event light, event set light, add a call to the parent function, and let's just duplicate the visibility. Perfect. So now what this does, it sets the visibility when this function is called, and the element inside the selection menu, so that is the selection menu button, is calling this function. So now if we hit play, we can see that it'll turn off and on our light. The same equivalent as with the materials or the exchange group, you can also create groups in here, which is the light group. So if we add all the elements that we want to have in the light group, it'll turn off and on all the lights of all the objects in place. So this is being lighted up, and this is being lighted up. So let's take another look inside the object calibrator. And we see we have more functionality in the selection menu, but most of them work very straightforward, equivalent to what I've just showed you. So for example, the activate or the open and close doors just toggle the equivalent functions, and they can be used just the same as the light functionality. The next topic that I want to go over is the pickup. So concerning the pickup, we have a few options in place. one very important one is a snapping type, which basically defines whether we have free placement in place or the object should behave like a physics object. So if you make something like a physics object and we hit play or simulate, we can see that this is just another physics thing and we can move it around. And for the other variables, the default holding type accounts for the hands. It defines which gesture is supposed to be used at the hands. I'm going to cover that in a later video. And the other ones should be very self-explanatory. It should auto turn on pickup, so something uh, should try to adjust its rotation when it's being picked up by the laser, and can be picked up sets whether the object can actually be moved or not. So the last thing that I want to be doing is add the object to the object dropper. So we have it in a nice little menu and we can actually select it. For that, we need a couple of steps. So the first one is we have to go into our experience object, which is inside experience tutorial info. That was created in the first episode. And we have to add a radio menu button, which is going to be the one for the object dropper, which is called button palette objects. And we have to add our object to the object list, which is going to be the calibrator, the object that we just created. Okay, so now we are going to have exactly one radio button when you open the radio menu, which is going to contain just one object in the palette. And now we still need to assign a category. We see that in the panels we have categories in place. I'm going to create a new one for this case, which is going to be found inside the project settings under gameplay tags. So we see here we have a lot of gameplay tags, and you may have these may come familiar. And if you want to add a gameplay tag to the category, we have a data table for that in place. So let's just open that data table and open our category. So we create a new one, which is going to be our random tutorial one, and the tag is named category dot tutorial dot random. The categories have a two hierarchy list. So the first element will always be category, so it's listed under the right name. And then we have a top level category, which is in our case tutorial, but the ones that already exist are construction, furniture, miscellaneous, and light. And there's a subcategory, which in our case is going to be just random. It of course can be anything, and now it's being listed in here. And we can check that in the project settings, and under gameplay tags we see that we have a new category list, and it's called tutorial random. So now that we have that set up, we still need to assign one last thing to the object itself. So we need to assign the category to it. We now see that we have a new random category here. And we also need to assign a name, which we call the calibrator. So this is going to be the display name that it shows. So now if we open the palette, we would see the level the entry of the object, but it's still missing some textures. So for that, we first have to import two textures. And the thing I did for my tutorial images was quite simple. I was going to the photo studio and just made my own textures of the object itself. So if I put in the calibrator object here that I newly created, I can make a high level screenshot from this image, just with creating a screenshot, just taking that one. And this I have to convert into a JPEG, and then I can import that. So I have prepared that a bit. Let me import that. Going to textures, palette objects. We see that we have all the objects in here. And I'm just going to import the one that I newly created. And we need one for the category as well. I have that in frameworks, palette, object, top category. I have the former categories here. And I'm going to import just some random picture for that. So now we need to assign those textures to the palette. And for that, we have the palette info. So this is located in blueprints, info, BP info palette. And there we see that we have a huge list of pictures. And we are going to enter one additional, and we have to scroll down all the way to the end. And we can add the calibrator here. And we have to create our assign our image, which was the text palette calibrator. So this is now in here. And now we also have to set the category. Scroll down all the way. So we see we have a list of categories assigned with the pictures, and we'll just make a new one and say that our tutorial category is supposed to be having a tutorial palette objects category tutorial, the one that I created. Save and compile that. And now we have the object dropper set up. I'm going to switch to the original level maps in the tutorial map. Yes. One additional thing is in the experience tutorial experience object. We also have to set not only that we want the object dropper, but which object categories we want to have listed. And there we want to have our tutorial object. And then if we just hit and compile, and now we can play. So now that we are inside VR, we can see that we have the radio menu with just one element, which is the object dropper. And we have one category, and we have just one item in here, which is our object. And we can place as many of them as we want. And all of them have the functionality that we implemented, so we can change the color of them, we can change the size of them, and we can even turn on and off the light, and also delete it. So that was everything that I wanted to be talking about for the objects. I hope I will see you guys in the next episode, and until then, have a great time.